U.S. intelligence officials are telling the Washington Post North Korea will not fully surrender its nuclear arsenal and is planning to actually hide some of those weapons. We should tell you CNN cannot independently confirm that. But those officials say they obtained evidence after the June 12th summit in Singapore showing that North Korea has facilities the U.S. knows nothing about, and it's using them to make fissile material for nuclear weapons. Just this week, President Trump continued to mark the summit as, quote, a great success. Joining me now is Yuri Friedman. He's staff writer covering global affairs for The Atlantic. Good morning to you, Yuri.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
So you've written about some of the mysteries surrounding that Singapore summit. What did North Korea actually agree to? And that is the real question mark here, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing that I want to focus on, and I think everyone should focus on in assessing whether the summit was a success, is this question of North Korea committing to work towards the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And if you think about it, if North Korea really wanted to just give up its nuclear weapons, why wouldn't it say that in plain English or Korean in the summit? You know, what they said is denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And that definition actually really matters because what they want is not just, to give up their nuclear weapons in exchange for economic aid or even normal relations with the United States. What they want is a whole transformation of the relationship with the United States. And what that could mean, if they want the United States to stop its hostile policy towards North Korea, is also potentially a withdrawal of U.S. forces from the Korean Peninsula, potentially an end to the U.S.-South Korean alliance. And so right now we're in this phase where we're trying to assess, okay, how serious is North Korea about its nuclear weapons, and also what will it demand in return. And what we've seen in the data points from the Washington Post reporting, also commercial satellite imagery that shows that kind of business as usual is continuing at its main nuclear reactor, where they're actually improving the infrastructure there, is that North Korea may be talking to the United States and may be committing somewhat vaguely to denuclearization in the future, but they're kind of proceeding with business as usual right now, and even potentially continuing production, as we see from these reports, of fissile material that could be used for nuclear weapons. So we have not seen North Korea actually roll back its program. And certainly, Donald Trump said after the summit that the North Korean nuclear threat is gone. That certainly is not the case.
Well, so how do you think the administration, the president in particular, is going to react to this kind of reporting?
What's been striking is he's been very conspicuously silent. We have not heard him on Twitter say, lying little rocket man has deceived me. We have not heard him dismiss these reports as fake news. So he has been quiet, and it'll be very, very telling to find out how he responds. Now, I think one thing to keep in mind is that Donald Trump did something that was very interesting in deciding to meet with the North Korean leader. He became the first American president to do so. And when I've talked to, officials in the government and also other experts, they say what he may be doing here is saying, we've done 25 years of negotiations that have not worked at all, and we've usually started at the lower level and moved up to the higher level. I'm going to start at the very top. And what he may be doing is saying, I want to transform the political relationship with North Korea in order to build trust that could eventually lead to arms control and denuclearization down the line. So there may be a world in which the president kind of plows ahead because he feels, okay, yes, they're not committed to completely denuclearize right now. They are still continuing some of their work, and yet we need to build the trust in order for them down the line to actually give up their nuclear weapons. So I'm not so worried about, he may say, I'm not so worried about the technical details of the moment. I'm going to plow ahead with this political opening to North Korea, because if we have better political relationships, if we're not adversaries, maybe they'd be willing to make more nuclear concessions.
Right. In other words, we're sort of laying the foundations here. But one of the things that would be critical to know, especially when you come up with some kind of an agreement, is how many nuclear warheads, how many nuclear weapons does North Korea have? And there's a lot of speculation here, and it goes all over the map. I mean, I've heard from a couple of dozen to, I believe it's the Washington Post, saying 65. Do you have any idea where that number really is?
Well, we don't know for sure, but I've heard, usually I think it's safe to say there are dozens and dozens of nuclear weapons. I have heard in the 60s, and that's based on the fact that we have one big nuclear facility that we know about that does plutonium production and uranium production. But there are also, as we know from this reporting over the last week, one and potentially two undisclosed facilities that do uranium enrichment. So I think it's fair to say there are several dozen. And what is interesting about the latest reporting is that while we in the United States, and especially intelligence officials, think that it's around 60, 65, what they seem to be picking up from their intelligence gathering is that North Korea is planning to tell the United States that it has far less than that. And one thing to keep in mind, North Korea is probably the hardest intelligence target of all. So one real challenge in doing any kind of deal with them is, let's say they say, we have 30 nuclear weapons. How do you know they don't have 31, 32, 33? And I actually have talked to some Korea experts who've said, the only thing we can verify is a halt to nuclear and missile tests. So we need to be very modest in our goals of what we can actually get verifiable in a deal. And it might not be the full denuclearization of North Korea, because we'll never know that.
Right. Because it's what you don't know makes it very difficult to figure out what it is you want to know. Yuri Friedman, thank you very much. We appreciate it this morning.